Let's talk about probiotics too, because this is a confusing one for a lot of people. They just hear online a podcast, a blog, a website. They'll hear probiotics. They think it's time to just throw it in. And a lot of people have a bad reaction to that. And I think we actually did a whole podcast on this, like when and why probiotics may make you feel worse. But why don't you give us just some spark notes on that? When and why and how do we integrate probiotics into these?
So people tend to have stomach issues in general because they have this bacterial overgrowth in the gut. That's going to affect the esophageal sphincter from closing. They also have a lack of enzymes and acids. So the food's rotting, it's putrefying, it's rancidifying, and creating lots of different gases as a result. Now, people that tend to have a lot of bad bacteria in their gut, they tend to be very sensitive to FODMAPs. These are fermentable carbohydrates, fructo, oligo, disaccharide, mono, and polyols. And again, probiotics tend to have FODMAPs in it because probiotics are inherently fermentable, right? Fermentation breeds bacteria, good bacteria growth. They can also breed bad bacteria growth, right? And so if you're consuming a lot of probiotics and you have a lot of bad bugs, it could really create a feeding frenzy, just like throwing chum in the water. When there's sharks around, it creates a feeding frenzy. If you go to your local lake, if I go down to Lake Austin and start chumming the water, right? Well, there's no sharks down there. So you're not going to see any sharks coming, right? And so think of probiotics and a lot of fermentables. They may be reasonably good and healthy for you, but if you have sharks in that water and you chum the water, you just create a feeding frenzy.
Wow. And that you're saying with probiotics, you're not necessarily even talking about prebiotics.
Correct. Again, people that have more extreme FODMAP and SIBO sensitivity, that's where probiotics start to become more of an issue. You can still have some SIBO and FODMAP sensitivity, and you may not rise to the level where probiotics are a problem, right? So people that are out there and having problems with their kombucha or their sauerkraut, it could also be a histamine issue because probiotics and fermentables are also high in histamine. So they could dovetail and be a couple of different things happening at the same time. Either way, if that's the case, we still have to work on FODMAP restriction because when we deal with gut bacterial issues, we starve on one side with diet changes. We kill on the other side with specific antimicrobials, and then we crowd out and overpopulate on the last component. So we starve, kill, and crowd.
Yeah, that's great. And then the Saccharomyces comes into the equation too, right? Which is kind of marketed and sold as a probiotic, but technically it's a beneficial yeast. I love Saccharomyces. It's something
it crowds out. It crowds out. So it has beneficial effects of crowding out. It also is shown to be very anti-C. diff, anti-H. pylori, anti-blasto, and it has immunomodulating benefits, increasing IgA levels too.
Yeah, we love Saccharomyces. It helps the mycotoxins too. I've seen it in a lot of people. And when I talked with Dr. Nathan, who is a guy who treats a lot of mold patients, he talked about Saccharomyces being great for specifically, I think it's actually metabolizing or changing the structure of the mycotoxins to make them more water soluble, but there may be sort of a crowding out effect with the mold too. So it's just a great overall thing. So if you're working on a gut healing protocol and you haven't used Saccharomyces, that may be something to chat with your practitioner about. It may be something great to add in.
Yep, I like it. That makes a lot of sense.